welcome to another review of First Minister's Questions by the three men on a blog team. Today, as you can see, we're somewhat diminished in numbers. Mr. Grant.
Everybody's going to England.
Alex Grant is doing south, Phil Attridge is doing south, but there's still two of us here to discuss what happened at First Minister's Questions. Norrie, what did you think? What was your first overall impression of today's?
Bit bland, basically nothing new. Labour went with colleges, yawn. The Liberals, Willie went with...
centralisation of police and fire.
Yeah, as usual, as did Ruth. Nothing new. Jackie Bailey was a bit more interesting.
I often wondered why they didn't pick her as a leader. She does at least have a brain.
Aye, well, she's now bashing on. Her thing at the moment is this members' bill that she's introducing on the bedroom tax. Hypocritical buggers! I'm sorry.
It took them how long for the Labour Party to come up with any policy on the bedroom tax?
And now they're the goodies, and their idea has to be followed, and you know.
Aye.
I'm sorry. I mean, that's just that's the zone. We have a right to be in charge, therefore what we do should be followed. I'm sorry, democracy blew you out the windows, kids. That was about the most interesting thing. This college numbers thing, they're bashing on about it. Now, I don't know about you, but I know what these part-time college courses were used for. It was quite often just to get you off the hook with a dole.
Right.
You know, I know people who have made use of them. They've all gone on to do what are they? Are they HNCs, ANCs now? Can't remember. But they've gone on.
HND.
They've used them as, you know, the doorway into full-time
access
courses.
I'm sure there are still access courses around if you want to.
Well, I mean, quite often
Like,
you have to do a year before you can get into uni, regardless of what you're. You know, I mean, certainly. Rory had to do that.
Well, I don't think.
Because of his age.
I don't think John Lamont really explored that possible issue properly. The idea that lifelong learning has been compromised by the current Scottish Government's policies.
Well,
she brought it up, but I don't know.
I'm sorry, you know.
He did focus on young people.
Well, the practicality is because we have free tuition, the impact on the Barnett formula of what's going on down south where they have tuition fees, their numbers are still dropping in colleges and universities.
Nerves are holding.
It should be something to be celebrated, and it is a priority thing. You know, there isn't the money to do everything. So the minute they come out and say, right, well, what we'll do is we'll half the number of places at university for Scottish students so that we can get part-time students into colleges, you know, but that's the great thing about being in opposition is you can continually criticise, you don't have to come up with solutions.
You can continually just suggest policies which you're never going to implement if you ever get into power.
No. Yeah.
Which the Labour Party did big style at their conference last week.
Yes.
My goodness.
Well, what I really liked about that was, if you go online, you can get the price of your electricity and gas fixed till 2017. Never mind for 20 months. You can do it now till 2017. So effectively, you don't need the government to do it. You can do it yourself.
Oh, that sounds like a fair deal.
Which I thank Wings Over Scotland.
By the way, I was wondering about this attack on Ed Miliband's father's reputation by the Daily Mail, and that stooshy that's going on. Paul Dacre being accused even by a fairly large number of fairly right-wing people, saying he's overstepped his mark. But I mean, it's almost like as if it's like a straw horse. You know, it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Ed Miliband's getting good press this week, so let's knock him down next week.
Well, what we'll do is
he's got a lot of sympathy, though.
No. What we'll do is we'll look at everybody's family history, and we'll start with David Cameron, whose great-great-great-grandfather slaughtered thousands of people in the Indian Mutiny. So therefore, David Cameron
is an unsuitable Prime Minister.
Is because
and he hates Britain.
Through his veins runs the blood of basically a war criminal.
Yeah, but almost you could have almost thought. But Ed Miliband's ended up with a sympathy vote right across the media down south, and it's almost as though it was a plant, if you see what I mean, a Labour Party plant. Loads of sympathy for Ben Miliband.
I just wonder if, I don't know, if they look above the border and they think that's what they're getting away with, we'll do it as well. I mean, have you been following Bateman's blog?
Yes, I think so. I haven't read it today or yesterday, but I generally speaking follow what Derek Bateman's up to. Yeah, he's very incisive, and I can see why the BBC sacked him, because he actually speaks the truth.
Well, what I found interesting about him, I mean, he did a piece where he basically kind of hinted that there was a sort of Labour bias, and then the following piece he explained himself by saying, no, there isn't a conspiracy. There is no conspiracy at the BBC, but because so many of the hierarchy, the management, have close ties to Labour, which in their journalistic days were very, very useful, now it looks like the Labour Party can phone them up and not so much dictate policy, but pressure them in certain directions. And because they then say, I got a phone call from Jimmy Bloggs, who's the Labour spin doctor at the moment, complaining about what happened, the staff then get the impression that they have a line that they should follow in order to save their jobs.
Well,
Which, you know...
I haven't read that one, but that looks
okay,
good.
it isn't a conspiracy.
No, it doesn't need to be a conspiracy.
But it's about how the House feels.
If you've studied Marxism, cultural hegemony, you don't need to have a conspiracy. It doesn't have to be planned.
That's what's accepted, yeah.
I mean, I was talking to somebody about this this morning, in fact, and you know, there's this London cultural hegemony, and it's so powerful at times people in Scotland don't even realise that whatever the news they're getting on television doesn't actually apply to them.
Yeah, yeah.
No idea. Oh, there's going to close schools, or the NHS is in trouble, or the police are, crime's gone up, or whatever it is, and people go, oh, panicking.
You may have noticed that First Minister's questions wasn't that lively.
We've been talking about other things. What else were we doing today? We went to a very interesting meeting where the speaker was Robin McAlpine, director of the Jimmy Reid Foundation. Now, Jimmy Reid is widely respected across the left in Scotland. And the foundation has been set up in his name. It's an almost unique institution in Scottish politics because it's a left-wing think tank. As far as I know, 99% of all the think tanks are actually funded by capitalist corporations.
Yeah.
And he's a fabulous speaker, and you will be seeing the results of that recording anyway.
The idea of the Commonweal, which was what was being discussed this morning, is a bit woolly for me.
But it starts off from we're trying to get a consensus on the left in Scottish politics, which mean the Labour Party and the SNP would be talking to each other.
A consensus in the left.
Yeah, all right. The lack of consensus was present in the room as soon as Willie Black opened his mouth and complained about the shouting attack. But no, it was pretty obvious. But the broad liberal left rather than the far left. But it is interesting. The idea is that regardless of the devolution result, the referendum result next year, whether it be devolution or independence, that Scotland should move to a separate welfare and taxation.
That's my problem with it. Where Willie Black was right. I'm sorry, if we vote no in September, that's it. Game's a bogey. There is no way Westminster, not the Liberals, not the Labour Party, not the Tories, will ever give us another, well, certainly not in my lifetime. That's it dead. We will see no taxation. All that will happen is the drip feed of the cuts to things that are important to us up here, the NHS, etc., will continue. It will impact the Barnett formula, and we will...
They'll probably abandon the Barnett formula.
Well, even if they don't, we will be forced into a situation where we have to follow these policies. We will have to charge tuition fees because there just won't be the money coming north.
Yep.
You know, all our money goes down there, they'll give us a bit back. I mean, one of the most interesting things was the recent, and I'm sure it's a government paper.
There's a paper out yesterday.
But since the inception of devolution, we're in surplus to the British Treasury of 42 million. Billion, sorry. And that's before we start taking into account, because there's certain things not in there. There's no differentiation between the countries in VAT, for instance. Alcohol duty, all these kind of things are just taken as one lump. There's no differentiation in the sense that Scottish whisky is exported from England, a large section of it, so that's not within the figures. So the 42 billion is probably like another, what, maybe 10 billion, just because of that. So in fact, we've been subsidising the rest of the UK. I feel sorry for Wales, by the way, because they're right. Northern Ireland.
It's hugely subsidised as well.
No, it's not.
Is it not?
Not according to these figures. Northern Ireland regularly puts more into the exchequer than England.
Oh well, I'll have to get
per head population.
Oh, no, I'll need to read that figure. Well, let's
send you the link.
Okay, so you guys watching and listening, it has been a fairly mundane First Minister's questions, so we've deviated a bit, but there were issues to be talked about. So maybe perhaps
we did have one other problem because of the meeting this morning. We didn't see it.
That's true. We haven't seen.
So we're totally unable to tell you what Joanne was wearing today.
As if we ever did.
Or the First Minister. Come to that.
I think he wears the same suit.
I think there was commentary. It was audio we heard, so there was commentary about Alex's big book of answers when he started giving Joanna a hard time for reading out her questions.
Oh boy, did she! Even, let's be honest. He did give her a hard time. I think she just, they picked on. Because he said she always reads out her questions and doesn't listen to the answers I give before she goes on to her next question. And so the Labour benches were all quite clearly having a go, well, you read everything out. Well, he's got to read everything out because he's got all these unknown answers. No idea what answers he's going to be given. But at least, I think he made a very valid point, which in fact, Phil Attridge regularly criticises Joanne Lamont on her... All she does is read a speech.
It's getting a bit samey. It's getting very samey. They're going to attack on colleges. It'd be interesting to know how many times that's been used as a subject. They're going to attack on the fire service.
Centralisation.
And 2-year-olds.
Didn't he mention 2-year-olds today?
Ruth spreads her attacks a bit better than the rest of them. But they must be doing too good a job.
Who?
The SNP, because they're giving limited opportunities, and it doesn't really matter what they attack on. They can always turn around and say, well, it's bad here, but look down south.
Right. Well, that's kind of it's always the First Minister's response to Ruth, whatever question she asks. At some point, he always switches around and says, well, you're in government down south, you're responsible for the cuts, for the austerity, everything that's gone wrong. No, it's handy for him.
Well, it is, yes, and it always will be, because they're never ever going to be in power at Westminster, so they've always got that.
Always got that.
All in all, not an inspiring First Minister's questions.
It was very few backbenchers as well. In fact, if you look what happened. Liam MacArthur, Lib Dem, asks about possible cuts to the renewable situation in Orkney by Scottish and Southern Electricity. It was interesting that he was shoehorned in, parachuted in with a constituency question, as if it was some emergency job losses, which seemed that's par for the course. But it became like a 1-2 Lib Dem attack from him, and then followed by Willie Rennie.
Yeah, but the problem there is actually nothing to do with the Scottish Government. So it is genuinely the Westminster Government threatening to cut subsidies.
Yeah,
it's that simple. Although I did notice a headline today in the Scotsman, which doesn't mean it's true, by the way, about a court case that's pending with one of the big wind farms, which is what I thought it was going to be about.
But what I meant was, with a 1-2 there, then Jackie Bailey seems to come up fairly regularly.
She seems to get a question every week.
Yeah, nearly every week. I mean, not quite sure what I don't know what you call it. Protocols are in Parliament.
Well, maybe she's the best amongst them.
It just.
But there is the other
Labour
Ken
backbencher.
McIntosh.
Well, he was going to be he was the alternative leader.
You never hear of him.
Ah, well, knives and backs is what I would have suggested has happened there.
We haven't seen our doctor guy. He's not been up.
Oh, Richard Simpson, was he?
Yeah,
He used to be up
Richard
quite a lot. He
Simpson.
was quite effective with his attacks.
He was. But again, I mean, every time.
What happened to Richard Bacon was always a pain in the butt, really. He was almost like Michael Gove. As soon as he opened his mouth, you think, oh, what a fool.
Well, I mean, they've kind of shot the opposition down because they've trebled the emergency money for the national health for the
I
winter.
noticed that.
9
So-
million from 3 million.
Yeah, it was actually interesting, the detail on that, because it was talking about how they'd actually, some IT whiteboard, which I'd never heard of, but it allows each consultant to see where their patients are on the
Progress
system,
of the patients,
progress
yeah.
through the system. That sounds actually quite interesting. I'd be keen to see how that worked myself.
And no mention of the failure in the IT system.
Oh, that was,
Which
now this is a very
surprised me.
good point. That could have, you'd have thought that would have been attacked.
Yeah. But
The Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board, what a name. Their IT system has been in serious trouble, and hundreds of appointments have had to be cancelled.
Yeah. But they just didn't. Maybe they're just conferenced out.
Well, there's another thing.
You know.
That's another issue altogether. I think we're going to have a Leaf Noise Up show, because I've got a few rants that are really not terribly relevant to today's show. Well, let's move forward to scores then. We got.
It's quite funny. It's quite difficult when you hear it,
Without seeing
and you
it.
don't see it because
Oh,
you don't
interesting.
have the advantage of the body language.
Right, you can't see what they're
Joanne,
doing.
I didn't think Joanne was particularly bad, good. Yeah, well, I'll give her a 5. Ruth Davidson, probably more effective than she's been for a wee while. So I'm going to
Her confidence hasn't been lost, and she gained maybe a bit of confidence having been to the Conservative conference. You know,
Although she got slapped about on Newsnight last night.
did she?
Yeah, she was left stumbling. Willie Rennie's just Willie Rennie. I'll give him a 2. Alex, I'll give him a 7, but you know, I'm kind of think he needs to change that. He's smart enough to change the pace occasionally. You know, I still think one-word answers are great from him. I really do. And I think that's what you should do, Joanne. Yes. No. Don't
Perhaps.
know. Yourself, Joanne?
Joanne, I think she was average on her own scale, so that means I'll give her 4. Because, I mean, let's be honest, she did just stick to her usual script. She started off quite well, because 20 years in education, my experience of 20 years in education, and the
She came out with a couple, didn't she?
First Minister.
Wasted education.
Wasted education, yeah. So I don't know.
Honours in cooking the books.
Aye, no. There'll be a few sound bites. She managed to get them in, so
Yeah.
we'll hear them on the radio and on TV, I'm sure, later on. And that's really the point of her. It's always the point of her speech at First
Yeah.
Minister's Questions, is to get her sound bites into the media. But that's all she really cares about, because so few people actually watch First Minister's Questions live. Only a few geeks like us. So no, she just gets a 4. Ruth, well, as I say, I felt she got more confident just because she's been amongst her peers, you know, lots of them. In Scotland, they're a rare breed, the Tories, but she goes to England and she suddenly feels, you know, oh, I'm normal. So I think that boosted her presentation, and her performance is nearly always good, because she's a trained television presenter, professional. But the meat, I'm not sure she did very well with the potential, what she could do, the material. Because Salmon was going to be ready
Salmon
for that
actually
question.
twisted that quite well, and you know, right, we don't want policemen behind counters in police stations. We want
Oh, it
them
was
out
all
in the
very
community.
well briefed on that. It was clearly going to be briefed on that, so that was fine.
What are you going to give her?
Ruth, no, I'll give her a 4. More than I normally give her. Willie Rennie, well, it was predictable given that they have. It's fair enough. They've been banging on about the centralisation right from the start. So I mean, you get brownie points for that. And now that there are cuts, I personally think those cuts were coming anyway, because most of this, as we both agreed, most people pick up the phone to call the police. You don't trot round to the police station. The only thing around there for is to produce your documents after being stopped driving or something, you know, or produce something or other, or lost property. But did he make much of a mileage out of it? Not really. He got struck. Both Ruth and he got struck down by Salmond on the south of the border. You're in charge and da da da. Give him 2. I mean, just not embarrassing. Presiding officer. What did she talk about? No, I thought she was almost unnoticeable, so she gets a 5 again. But overall, it was a dull FMQs. So if you haven't seen it, but you've watched our review, I wouldn't bother. Settle for the review.
What about Alex?
Oh, Alex. Oh boy, Alex himself. I thought he was up to par. I'll give him his average 8, I think. He's had a couple of really good ones, so no, an 8 will do.
Well, Alex out of top with 15. Ruth and Joanne with 9. Willie with a 5, a bad 5. Presiding officer with a 10. Which kind of sums it up. Bit samey.
But maybe we just missed out not watching it live.
Yes, I kind of think the visuals would have helped, because the body language is more of a giveaway than the voice.
Meanwhile, I'll give you a trailer. As I say, the meeting we attended that clashed with watching First Minister's Questions live. Hopefully, technically the recordings will be all right. There were some it was a very interesting meeting, and Robin Calpine is a worthy director of the Jimmy Reid Foundation. He's quite a powerful speaker, and I think he's a good champion of the left in Scotland. And also, we got the views of a few of the radical left activists in Edinburgh that happened to be at the meeting, including Willie Black, who berated Ian Duncan Smith at the George Hotel. The what?
The rat man.
The rat bag. Called him a rat bag and got away with it. So look forward to that on our site. And thank you, Norrie, for finding the time to review this on a busy day. And watch out for us next week. Thank you. Goodbye.